Before fire, before stone, before the first name was ever spoken, there was a breath. Not the breath of lungs, but the breath of the alchemists. A sacred pulse hidden behind the veil of silence. So powerful it could shape metal without hammer, bend light without flame, and summon a new path from within a single exhale. But that breath was erased, struck from every scroll, buried beneath centuries of noise. Why? Because the world wasn't ready. Because the breath reveals the truth, and truth can never be controlled. Yet it was never lost. The true alchemists remembered. And now, so will you. Because if you stay until the end, you will remember the breath. Not with your mind, but with your soul. And once you awaken it, you'll never be the same. Let us begin. Long before the stars ignited, before the desert had a name, there was only silence, and within that silence a rhythm. Not sound, not thought, but something deeper. A pulse that breathes through all things. The ancient ones knew this rhythm. They didn't speak it, they didn't write it, they felt it. In the soles of their feet, in the hollow of their bones, in the way the wind would pause just before a revelation. This was the first breath, the breath before creation, a breath that did not enter the body, but was the body itself, being remembered by the universe. We speak of it not as air, but as alignment, not oxygen, but intention. It's what the early mystics called the silent spark, a breath so pure that it didn't need lungs, a motion so still that it carried entire worlds inside it. When the first true alchemist stood before the threshold of existence, he didn't pray, he didn't chant, he simply breathed inward and let the world echo his soul back to him. That was the forgotten moment, the one that birthed the forbidden path. And here's the truth. You have felt this breath before. In the quiet before a major life change. In the stillness just before your heart was broken or healed. In that wordless second before you said yes to something that would change your life forever. It's always been there, but no one taught you how to listen. Not until now. But why was it forbidden? Why did the breath have to be hidden? We enter the secret next.
There are truths that were never meant to be silenced, and yet they were. Not because they were false, but because they were too true, too alive, too dangerous to the systems built on control. The breath of the alchemist was once taught in temples without walls. It was not written in books because its power could not be reduced to ink. It was passed from eye to eye, from silence to silence, between those whose hearts had been cleansed by fire. The breath was more than a practice. It was a mirror, one that showed the seeker the exact state of their soul. And that was the problem. Because in a world that thrives on illusion, a mirror like this becomes a threat. It revealed when a priest was lying. It exposed when a king ruled from fear. It awakened those meant to stay asleep. So it was hidden, erased from scrolls, burned from stone, swallowed by the sands of manipulated time. But like all truths that belong to the eternal, it never truly died. It whispered through symbols, echoed through dreams, hid inside the breath of poets, and slept in the lungs of those who were born remembering something they couldn't explain. And that includes you. Because if you found this message, it's not by chance, it's by resonance. The forbidden breath is already stirring within you. Not to be copied, not to be used as magic, but to be remembered. And remembrance is dangerous to those who still live in forgetting. But before you can remember the breath, you must understand what it actually is. Not a technique, not a ritual, but something infinitely deeper. Let's enter the lungs of creation.
Not all breaths move the body, some move the invisible. The breath we speak of now, the one that was erased, was not meant to keep you alive. It was meant to wake you up. It didn't fill the lungs, it filled the field, the sacred space that surrounds and responds to every soul. This is not metaphor, this is alchemical law. Everything in the universe is vibration, and vibration obeys intention, but not the intention of the mouth, the intention of the core, the unspoken center that pulses just beneath awareness. When the true alchemist breathes, he is not inhaling air, he is exhaling alignment. He becomes a tuning fork for the divine. His breath is not a reaction, it is a command, not from ego, but from essence. And in that moment, reality listens. The shape of events begins to shift. Old wounds loosen their grip. New timelines open like doors that were always there but never noticed. The breath reshapes form because it travels faster than sound, deeper than thought, and older than memory. This is why it was hidden, because it bypasses the mind and speaks directly to matter. Those who mastered it could calm storms, soften metal, and even still the trembling of a dying heart. But it could not be faked. If your inner world was chaotic, the breath would shatter you before it created. That's why the breath was given only to those who had walked through fire, only to those who had died to illusion. And now you're being shown its edge. But to approach this breath, your soul must pass through a threshold, and that threshold is the chamber of silence. Every true initiation begins in silence. Not the silence of a quiet room, but the silence that exposes everything. It is not peaceful. It is not empty. It is alive, and it listens. This is the chamber of silence, the hidden space that exists beneath the noise of your daily breath, where the true breath, the forbidden breath, waits to be remembered. The ancient alchemists would spend days in darkness, not to escape the world, but to hear the voice behind the voice, to descend beyond the thoughts that speak and meet the presence that breathes. It was in this chamber that they confronted their own distortions. Every false desire, every craving for control, every fear dressed as power, because the breath only awakens when the soul is still enough to be rearranged by truth. Here, there are no mantras, no instructions, only the pulse of the inner flame, and the invitation to sit before it without masks. The silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, you begin to see what you have exhaled into your life without knowing. Patterns, illusions, loops of breath from a past that was never yours. And only then, only when you have seen these things clearly, does something else emerge. Not from above, not from outside, but from within your own stillness, a sacred breath that seems to rise from the earth inside your chest. It doesn't need air. It carries light, and it is waiting for you. But you must first pass through the fear of hearing your own soul. Because once you hear it, you will never again be able to pretend you are asleep. And from that moment on, you begin to prepare for the first breath of the true self.
There is a breath that doesn't come from the lungs. It comes from a memory beyond time. It doesn't begin with you. It begins with what you've forgotten. When it rises, it does not ask for permission. It simply recognizes you. And for a moment, before your mind interrupts, before your fears speak, you feel it, that you are not just a body, not just a story, not even a seeker. You are a note in the original symphony. You are the one who has breathed this breath before, in temples long erased, in lifetimes unnamed, in initiations where no words were spoken. And when the breath returns, it returns like a friend who never blamed you for forgetting. It is warm. It is deep. It vibrates in your spine and your palms and in the space behind your eyes. You don't need to understand it. You only need to feel how everything responds when you allow it. The heartbeat slows. The mind softens. The air around you seems to shimmer. Because something ancient within you is remembering itself. You are no longer breathing to survive. You are breathing to become. And here lies one of the greatest truths of hermetic alchemy. You do not change reality by forcing it. You change it by exhaling the version of you that already lives in the gold. That is the breath that was erased. The one that speaks not "I want," but "I remember." And remembrance changes everything. But remembering is not enough. The breath does not awaken fully until it is felt as flame. And so, the alchemist must now walk into fire. Because the one who remembers must transmute, and only fire can ignite the true alchemical breath. The breath was never meant to remain soft. It begins in stillness, but it awakens as fire, a sacred fire, not to burn you, but to reforge you. The ancient alchemists called it the breath that burns without smoke, because when it finally rises from your soul, it ignites the very fabric of who you thought you were. It melts your masks, it boils your shadows to the surface. It turns your illusions into vapor. This is not metaphor. The breath, when aligned with truth, heats the inner field. It brings forward everything that is cold, hidden, or fragmented. It reveals all the ways you've been breathing in fear and calling it normal. And when that fire touches your lungs from within, something ancient begins to crack open. A memory, a vow, a wakar long buried beneath the ashes of survival. This is why most avoid the breath, because it requires death, not of the body, but of the persona that cannot hold gold. The breath doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be willing, to be reshaped, to be seen fully, to be reduced to ember so that the eternal spark may rise and take your place. The breath as flame is not something you control, it's something you surrender to. And in that surrender, you discover the power to shape not only your path, but the substance of reality itself. You become the fire, and your breath becomes the forge. Now that the breath is flame, you are ready to learn how it moves through the field. What does it change? What does it touch? Let's enter the next phase, where vibration becomes command.
Once the breath becomes flame, it no longer moves through lungs, it moves through realms. At this point, the true alchemist understands. The body was never the source, it was only the instrument. The real breath, the forbidden breath, lives in the field. It pulses between thoughts. It vibrates between moments. It carries messages that the mouth could never speak. When you breathe from the flame, your exhale becomes a signal, not to other people, but to reality itself. This is what was hidden. Because if you knew how to direct your breath with aligned vibration, you would no longer be predictable, no longer programmable, no longer easy to control. You would speak without speaking, command without force, create without effort. The alchemist does not say, "Let there be light." He exhales, and the light responds. This is not magic. This is law, hermetic law. As above, so below, as within, so around. The breath that is rooted in flame carries the signature of the soul, and the field knows how to obey soul. Not ego, not emotion, but essence. The reason this breath was erased from memory is because it makes you responsible, truly responsible. When your inner world is out of harmony, your breath transmits that dissonance. But when your inner gold begins to shine, your breath carries it forward and shapes what meets you. The breath becomes a mirror turned outward, and the world becomes an echo chamber of your transmutation. Now that the breath has returned to the field, we must ask, who are you when you are no longer breathing just for yourself? Let's enter the sacred space where the breath becomes a gift.
There comes a moment when the alchemist realizes the breath is no longer his. It has become something greater, a stream, a current, a golden mist that moves through him but belongs to everything. When this happens, you stop asking what the breath can do for you and begin to ask what it came to restore in the world. Because there are those around you who are gasping in silence, who have not remembered yet, who breathe out of habit, not awareness, and your breath can become a torch in their darkness. Not through preaching, not through performance, but through presence. When your breath has been purified by the inner fire, it carries a vibration that soothes the unseen wounds in others. It softens their fear. It reminds them, without words, that something ancient still lives, that there is a way back. You enter a room, and the energy shifts, not because of your voice, but because of your exhale. It carries calm, it carries clarity, it carries permission to begin again. This is when the alchemist stops seeking magic and becomes the magic. The breath becomes your offering, a way of being in the world that restores rather than consumes. This is why the breath was protected, because if it fell into unworthy hands, it would be used to manipulate, to dominate, to seduce and control. But when held by a soul that has burned through its own illusions, the breath becomes a bridge back to wholeness for everyone it touches. And so now you no longer ask, "What can I get with this breath?" You ask, "What can I give back to the field that gave me life?" But even this is not the end, because one question remains: where does this sacred breath truly come from? To answer that, we must descend one final time into the lungs of the divine.
There is a breath you do not take. It takes you. It moves before thought. It pulses beneath time. It is the breath of the universe itself, what the Hermetic masters called the lungs of the divine. Every galaxy was spun from this breath, every tree, every tide, every heartbeat. It is not yours, yet it lives in you. Not personal, yet intimate. Not limited, yet whispering your name. And here lies the paradox that only the true alchemist can hold. You are not the source of the breath, but you are its vessel. You are not the origin, but you are the mirror in which the origin sees itself. When you breathe consciously, aligned with your inner flame, you are not generating energy. You are syncing with the current of the divine lungs. You are tuning your soul to the great exhale that birthed the stars. And when you do this, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to breathe you back. It responds, it adjusts, it reconfigures. Not because you're trying to manifest, but because you have become a harmonic within the divine rhythm. This is why the forbidden breath was never meant for the masses, because without reverence, without surrender, without inner transmutation, the connection is noisy, distorted, ineffective. But when the soul is ready, when the ego has been refined, when the intention is pure, you begin to breathe in tandem with the sacred. Your inhale is the world arriving. Your exhale is the world becoming. And every breath becomes a ritual of reunion.
And yet, the final mystery remains. If this breath is divine, how can it be forgotten? The answer lies not in the breath, but in the veil that covers it. Let us lift that veil.
The forbidden breath was never truly lost. It was veiled, not by darkness, but by layers of noise, by the weight of the world, by the stories we were taught to breathe instead. From the moment you were born, you inhaled the atmosphere of forgetting, not just polluted air, but polluted belief. You were told who to be, how to feel, what to fear. And with every exhale, you unconsciously reinforced a reality that was not yours. This is the veil, not a curse cast upon you, but a mist woven from every breath that was not aligned with your soul. And so, little by little, you began to believe that breath was only about survival, that it was mechanical, biological, ordinary. But the true alchemist knows nothing about breath is ordinary. It is the sacred thread between spirit and form. It is the bridge from what is to what could be. The veil is not evil, it is necessary, because power without preparation breeds destruction. The breath must remain hidden until the soul has walked far enough to seek it from within. And now you are lifting it. With every moment of presence, with every silence embraced, with every false exhale you choose to stop, the veil thins. And then, for a moment, you glimpse it, a breath that moves like memory, tastes like truth, and hums like fire pressed into gold. It was never gone, you are simply breathing around it. But now that you see through the veil, you must make a choice: to return to the rhythm of the world or step fully into the breath that belongs to the alchemist. The next step is irreversible.
There comes a moment, not marked by clocks, but by a shift inside your very being. You do not expect it, you cannot plan for it. But when it happens, you know. You are sitting in stillness, or walking alone, or staring at nothing. And suddenly, something exhales inside you, and it's not your lungs. It is the breath returning. Not the physical breath, but the sacred rhythm, the breath that the ancient alchemists once carried like flame between temples, now rising in you as if it had never left. In that moment, you remember something impossible, that this breath has always been yours, that you were born with it, but the world whispered you into forgetting. And yet, it never judged. It only waited, patient, silent, alive. Now that it's back, your body feels different, not lighter, but more true. The space around you feels warmer. Time bends slightly, and reality listens. Because this breath is not a symbol, it is a vibration of remembrance. And when you breathe it consciously, you are telling the universe, I am no longer hiding. You are no longer breathing to escape death. You are breathing to initiate life. This is the breath that bends timelines, that realigns karma, that reshapes the very metals of your soul. But most importantly, it is the breath that chooses you back. Because breath is a relationship, and when you show up with reverence, it meets you with truth. This is the breath the world tried to erase, but the alchemist within you never forgot.
Now the breath is alive again. What will you do with it? The final step is to carry it forward as living gold.
You are no longer the seeker. You are no longer the student. You are no longer the one waiting for permission to remember. You are the vessel, the flame, the open channel through which the ancient breath now moves freely. This is not a metaphor. This is the final stage of inner transmutation. The metals of your soul, once heavy with fear, doubt, and longing, have melted, purified, and become conductive. Now the breath does not belong to you, but it lives through you. You speak, and truth echoes. You move, and the field adjusts. You breathe, and the air carries codes of memory that others forgot they needed. The alchemist no longer tries to change the world. The alchemist becomes the frequency that shifts it. You don't need to force. You don't need to convince. You don't even need to teach. You simply exist in alignment with the sacred breath, and that alone becomes healing, reminder, reverberation. You walk into silence, and silence greets you with light. You step into darkness, and darkness parts like smoke around gold. Because now your breath is no longer survival, it is creation. It is not repetition, it is revelation. It does not follow the world. It sings the forgotten tone that the world was built upon. This is why the breath was hidden, because the moment you reclaim it, you no longer need anyone to translate the divine for you. You carry it, you echo it, you are it. The true alchemist does not breathe alone. The universe breathes through him. And now, so it breathes through you. And the next time you breathe, you will know. It is not just you inhaling life. It is life remembering itself through your presence.
If you've made it here, it means something ancient in you has begun to stir. Not because of these words, but because your soul was already breathing beneath the noise, waiting for this moment to remember. The forbidden breath was never truly forbidden, only forgotten, guarded, preserved for those ready to receive it without distortion. You were never meant to live in borrowed rhythms. You came here to breathe in gold and exhale the architecture of a new world. Now the breath is yours again. It pulses in your presence. It listens as you speak. It shapes the invisible as you move. But most of all, it remembers you. And every time you enter silence, every time you choose to breathe with soul instead of fear, you reopen the path for others to remember too. Because the alchemist doesn't just transform lead into gold, he transforms the forgotten into light. If this breath touched something in you, tell us. What did you remember that you never knew you had forgotten? Your words may awaken someone else. Drop a wind or a fire in the comments if you felt the breath stir within you. And remember, this wasn't the end. It was only the first breath.